Hello, Inklings, and I'm doing something a bit different today. Having some new tech-related problems with this laptop and my headset, so I'm just gonna be doing this live without, being live. Not really edited down and stuff, but not going up live. Yeah. So, with Justice League hitting theaters, well, yesterday, I asked my favorite comic group, which is also my favorite comic book YouTubers fan group, technically. Go look at my top 10-ish comic book YouTuber videos if you don't know who that is. Anyways, I asked them what is the best Justice League storyline. I had to omit Elseworlds only because it's really easy to make a fantastic story like Kingdom Come, Injustice, or New Frontier when you don't have continuity to work with. And that narrowed it down to two comics. Well, it narrowed it down to pretty much the most votes, or at least the most widely accepted, was two comics. Earth 2 by Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely, which is awesome in its own right, but obviously by the title, we are going to be looking at JLA Tower of Babel. Yeah, that's right, JLA Tower of Babel. And since I'm doing this a bit more on cam than usual, sorry about not having the cutaways that my previous binging on comics had. But hey, less jump cuts than that Runaways all cam I did years ago. So there's always a bright side, right? So the Justice League, we all know them, we all generally like them most of the time. But of course, by the mid-90s, there were so many spin-offs and whatnot that low sales led to DC totally just revamping the franchise into the JLA comic book in 1997. Does that actually relate to this story? Not really, but the new back to basics approach did that. But the new back to basic approach really did give us the Watchtower, but more importantly, brought back in the fashion of the original lineup. I'd say in a fashion because while we do have a returning Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, and Martian Manhunter, Green Lantern is Kyle Rayner and Flash is Wally West. But for this book, we also have Aquaman and Plastic Man on the team. Oh, and what's funny is that the trade I have collected, the whole Tower of Babel storyline, and the issue preceding it. Okay, it's not that funny, but meh, it's just a neat fact, I guess. So with all that banner out of the way, what is the plot? Well, the plot is actually fairly straightforward in only a way the evil Ra's al Ghul can be. Ra's and the League of Assassins, wrong league, have stolen Batman's contingency plan to defeat the rest of the Justice League. If things got out of hand. He came up with it if things got out of hand, namely if they got body swapped, but that gets a bit of a retcon later, but I will go into that. I swear. But that's not actually the story. Or rather, that's the crux of the story to keep the Justice League busy, while Ra's goes through another plan to try and reduce the Earth's population to make it more controllable. For the sake of spoiler warning, time to go through what bad contingencies are, because they're kind of sadistic and deal a lot with nanites. So first biggest thing is that they did have Martian Manhunter covered in nanites and reduced to... Oh, hold on, I've got a picture of this. No, that's Frozen. We'll get to him. Basically, what happens is he gets covered in nanites that act like magnesium. Hopefully that actually shows up on... And yeah, that's him doing his little rhythmic dance there. But basically what it does is covers him in nanites, and it acts like magnesium, so when exposed to air, he is on fire. For those not in the know, John's greatest fear is fire, and depending on who's writing, it's also a hell of a weakness. Then you have Plastic Man, who gets coated in liquid nitrogen, and shattered. I know it's not that good of a picture, but hey. Then, yeah, I know that's actually kind of a like. That's not even sadistic. That is, here's how we take this guy out. Because who knows if he'll actually reformulate from it. Batman, I assume, would know if he would. But anyways, Aquaman's is probably the most terrifying in that using Scarecrow's fear toxin, Aquaman is rendered aquaphobic. As in, he is scared of water. So he can't submerge himself and will die within hours because he can't submerge himself. Then again, you could say, well, why not just do that Shamu thing and just start splashing buckets of water onto him? True, that's an easy answer. Anyways, then Kyle Rayner's is weird because he's rendered blind by hypnosis, which means he can't use his ring since it's kind of a point and do sort of thing. Wonder Woman Wonder Woman then gets nanites in her brain ear canal area that makes her think she's fighting this super opponent that is, pretty much equal to her in every way. And because it's Wonder Woman, she won't back down from that fight, so she'll fight until her body gives out. Flash gets shot with a special bullet that pretty much gives him light speed sized seizures. Yeah, it's pretty intense like that. I wish I could find it, but you know me. Anyways, he gets shot with this bullet that gives him light speed level seizures, so he's just out of it. Superman is probably the oddest because he gets dosed with red kryptonite, which makes his skin all see-through and ultra-absorbent to sunlight, causing him intense pain. Yes, in this continuity, Batman created red kryptonite by putting regular green kryptonite and just irradiating the hell out of it, and that's how red kryptonite gets made. I may make an eventual video on just talking about all the kryptonites, but we'll burn that bridge when we get there. And then Batman's own contingency, or to take Batman out of this, his parents' bodies are taken away, and because Batman's got a lot of parental issues, he spends most of his time trying to find them and not focus on the League of Assassins or pretty much anything else going on. But honestly, it is a comic worth reading, so I won't spoil too much, except that the real plot Raish has on the world is why this is called Tower of Babel. Literally everything I just listed was just him trying to take out the League so he can do this stupid, stupid thing. So while the plot is pretty nifty and you should definitely read it, I will talk for a second about one of the biggest shortcomings of this book, and that's the art. While I really don't mind it, it's early 2000s, and sometimes the inks can definitely get over embellished, and the models can be easily bulkier than hell, which I don't want to say is a negative because I kind of, I read all these books and like the art really is good in places, but then you get but then while it is really good, I think it's not bad for me, but someone who's like only used to the modern digital art that's kind of simplified but never overly liney and stuff like that, unless it's trying to be a throwback, they they couldn't they probably won't be able to like go, oh okay, it's a little wonky but not too bad. Usually I don't get a lot of people who go, oh, this is ugly, but some people just can't handle the darker lines and everything like that. Though, actually, I was wondering if that was because of this print. There does seem to be a lot of overly dark ink, like coloring more than inking, though it could just be how it goes. However, since this is early 2000s, coming literally off the cusp of the 90s, which, yes, while I will say that DC was definitely on the high road in the 90s, they did have their moments. You still get funny as hell derp face. I love the derp faces. But ultimately, the reason. Now, here's where we usually do the analysis part, and I'm definitely going to because a lot of this, you could read it as a simple, plain story. You read the wiki, you got the answers. Because it really is a simple story. But here's where the real discussion comes into play. Most everywhere I looked, from IGN to Den of Geeks, has this on their list of best storylines, and everyone I asked generally has it on there as well. Even if they list like 6 or 7 different storylines, Tower of Babel will be up there. But why? The most universal the most universal answer I would think is because Justice League of America's comic book, or rather because the Justice League comic book was a step above the rest. First and foremost, it bounced around at the top selling comics for DC in its full run with good cause. When Morrison relaunched the series, it wasn't just about those heroes coming together in their clubhouse to see what random foes they're going to go after. He brought them together for the most vital threats and important missions. I mean, well before that, I mean, while yes, before that, the dozens of Justice Leagues and spin-offs were good, or at least ranging from good to really not, Morrison takes it not only back to basics, but gives them the Watchtower, taking them literally above everywhere else and looks down upon. And that's where the modern mentality that the Justice Leagues that we're in with the Justice League, where it's this they're inherently gods trying to be human. Yes, Batman's a human, but come on, he's been human in name only for like 50 years now. Get over it. Anyways, that's how Morrison portrayed them. He gave them the godlike pantheon feel, so it wasn't like their Detroit era where they were trying to be as street as they could be. This was literally the opposite. They were above the rest, dealing with odds that were just insurmountably huge. Like the massive world, actually, good example, the massive World War III storyline by Morrison that came right before Tower of Babel. Granted, that story thought that Aztec's death would mean something, but not the point. So outside of a fluff issue in between World War II, in between World War III, and this storyline, where they deal with this weird, what's the best way to say it? JLA issue 42 is they shrink down and deal with an industrialized bacterial civilization inside of a child's brain. Yeah, it's weird. I will have a Comic a Day episode up for that over on my Comic a Day channel. But Morrison's stories always show them as the best and brightest. Or rather, World War III could be considered as Morrison's story to show them at their biggest, brightest, epicest. Epicest. But then you jump to, after that, not counting the Dan Curtis Johnson fluff issue in between, then you jump to Mark Waid's Tower of Babel, and we have them torn down hard and fast. It's not so much the deconstruction of superheroics that gets so popular in trade form, but rather it takes these well-known and really in their element paragons and brings them crashing down. Then that reaches the second really big reason this storyline is as over as it is. It's not the villains winning. It's not Final Crisis or Forever Evil, where the big tagline is "Evil finally triumphs." This is evil using Batman to win. It's a classic semi-betrayal because Batman had all this ready to go just in case. But while Batman says that it really was just in case their minds got switched with the Injustice gang, though that gang is not to be confused with my gang of friends who continues to push the Injustice comics onto people. I gotta stop derailing. Some of these are very much in tune with the minds of the person and not the body, the physical form. A good, for instance, would be Aquaman and A Fear of Water. You can easily argue that anyone can be given the fear gas and then fear water, so it's based off the body. But when you have Martian Manhunter, his is he gets covered in nanites and then lit on fire. His personal fear is fire. So if hypothetically Cheetah jumped into his mind, she wouldn't have that fear. Similar to Wonder Woman, her nanites was for her to forever. 1 second. Okay, that's just Twitter. Hey, follow me on Twitter. Anyways, Wonder Woman's nanites was for her to forever fight the same villain over and over again until her body gave out. For Wonder Woman, that works fantastically well for her character. But again, would someone like Captain Cold do the same thing in her body? I doubt it. There's other things probably a lot of us would do in Wonder Woman's body. Yeah, horrible joke. This is why I don't do these live. But that's where the fun tidbit is. Well, that's the case in the story. He points out when the last time they and the Injustice gang switched out. I should have had this written down, but I didn't. He brings it up. It's actually revealed in... I'm not sure if it's actually retconned or revealed later that his contingencies were based off the Justice League's action, as revealed in Identity Crisis, where they screwed with his mind after he found out they mind-wiped Dr. Light, and was very much against it. Yes, while Identity Crisis is very divisive between fan base, as a concept it did some fairly intriguing and interesting things for the DC Universe. This would also lead into Batman building Brother Eye, leading into the very good Infinite Crisis. So hey, if you don't like Identity Crisis, it also has ties to Infinite Crisis. Infinite Crisis, not Infinity Crisis. That's probably going to be the next Thanos storyline that Marvel pulls up. Was that a rant or actually a good point? Not sure. Either way, the point I'm going with is that the reason this story isn't remembered because of Ra's al Ghul's plan, but as Batman sort of indirectly taking out the League, is because the repercussions are wholly character driven. Ra's is almost an afterthought by the end of this, because ultimately this is about the repercussions of Batman being Batman, even ending with a vote from the other members in the League to see if Batman should stay. Of course, I love where Superman's like, "You'll always know how I'll vote." And he votes yes, of course, because, God, seriously, why hasn't anyone outside of the Wildstorm universe and now in DC universe just had Superman and Batman hardcore going at it? Actually, that's probably why, because now they had Midnighter and Apollo and they didn't have to worry about that. So, I always do a verdict for binging on comics, and frankly, even if the art isn't anything to write home about in your mind, being a hell of a story that's not only righteous in its own right, but uses the characters to best of their abilities, not on a powers front, but on a who they are front, as Mark Waid tends to do brilliantly, the verdict is simple. Collect it. Collect it means that it's not just worth the buy outright, but worthy of owning and collecting. But even more than that, since this isn't a graphic novel, but a collection, but pretty much a trade, then go out and buy this series as a whole. The whole series gives you some of the best Justice League stories in the way that you at home assumably think you know about the Justice League. That, oh, I know what the Justice League is like. That comes from JLA more so than any other thing. Unless you're, viewing, you're like, oh, I know, the Justice League from reading the, Justice League Europe or Justice League during the Detroit era. Then, obviously you can tell where your colors are painted from. That makes sense. Anyways, that's all for today. If you agree with me and think this was a fantastic storyline with a lot of character and a lot of awesome, or if you think I'm wrong and you feel that this should just. Uh, sorry, burnt my tongue on coffee earlier today. Anyways, or if you felt that I should have just talked about Justice League Doom, which is basically the animated and kind of more Injustice League driven, or Injustice Gang driven storyline that uses this, then let me know in the comments below. Also, in the comments below, give me an idea on what I should do next for binging on comics, which will be in the same style as my last several, without me on screen, so much rejoicing on that. Don't forget to like the Archivist on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and please consider pledging to our Patreon. That also covers a Comic a Day channel and ComicSins, the CinemaSins knockoff for comic readers. All the links to all my stuff is in the description below. And as always, stay golden, Inklings.